This is a video for the functions module and it's section Function D. Now in this video we're looking at adding, subtracting, multiplying and dividing functions. Now we're evaluating operations involving functions for a given value. It's possible to either evaluate each function at the given value and then perform the operation on the results, or algebraically perform the operation with the functions and then evaluate the result for the value given. Now this can be summarized into the following rules. Okay, so f plus g of x is simply f of x plus g of x. F times g of x is f of g times g of x. F takes g of x is simply f of x minus g of x. And f over g of x is f of x over g of x. So you can see how they're splitting up. It's pretty straightforward. But let's look at some examples so you understand what they mean. Here I have determined the following given, and I'm given two functions. I've got the function of x is x squared, and I've got the function g of x is 2x plus 1. So my first one here says f plus g of x. So according to the rules, f plus g of x is simply f of x plus g of x. Okay, f of x is x squared, g of x was 2x plus 1. So that's it, you're done. Okay, if I was to find a value now, so if the question actually said what's f plus g of 3, okay, I would simply substitute 3 into there. So 3 squared plus 2 lots of 3 plus 1, which is 9 plus 6 plus 1, which is 16. Okay, so let's look at the next one, f take g of x. Okay, so again, this is just becomes f of x take g of x. So f of x is x squared. Now there's a take, make sure you put the next function in brackets because that take applies to the whole lot. Okay, so you now have x squared take 2x take 1. And again, if you were finding f take g of 3, you would just substitute in. So 3 squared minus 2 times 3 minus 1. So 9 minus 6 minus 1, which is 2. Okay, and you could prove that that's the same. So if I actually went f of 3 minus g of 3, I'd also get 2. Okay, so you can prove that you're right, and that's shown in the textbook. So if you want to see what I mean, have a look there. F times g of x, so that's f of x times g of x. So that becomes x squared 2x plus 1. X squared times 2x is 2x cubed. X squared times 1 is plus x squared. Again, in the textbook it shows you that they are the same by substituting a value in, so have a look. Here becomes f of x over g of x, so I have x squared over 2x plus 1. There's no more that I can do there. Now we're going to look at composition of functions, and we kind of touched on this in the last video. So it's possible to find the function of a function. Okay, and we did see that at the end of the last video where we were looking at, you would hopefully remember doing g of f of x. Okay, you evaluated that. So that's called composition of functions. Okay, and instead of an easy notation for it, so the composite f of g is written like that. So f little circle g. So f of g is defined here. Okay, f of g of x is simply f of, put in brackets, g of x. Very similar to the one we did previously. So the order of composite of functions is important. Okay, so don't get this mixed up. It's f of g of x, not g of f of x. Okay, it's different. That is not the same as g of f of x. They're different. Okay. So let's look at some examples. Determine the following given. Okay, we have two functions here. F of x is x squared, g of x is 2x plus 1. So the first one is f of g of x. So f of g of x. So all I do is write the f, and instead of writing g of x in here, I actually write what the function is. So 2x plus 1. So you can see that that there is simply being replaced. Okay, now I look at my function of x and I plug 2x plus 1 into it. Okay, so I'm getting this and I'm going to put it where that x is. So it becomes 2x plus 1 all squared. Then I can expand the brackets. So 4x squared plus 4x plus 1. Okay, next one, g of f of x. So again, write the g, but in the middle, write what that f of x is. So g of x squared. I now get that x squared, and I'm going to put it where the x is. Okay, so that becomes 2 lots of x squared plus 1. So 2x squared plus 1. Okay, next, g of x. Okay, so g of x is 2x plus 1. So I'm plugging into g of x 2x plus 1. So where the x is, I'm going to put a 2x plus 1. So I've got 2 lots of 2x plus 1 plus 1. So that becomes 4x plus 2 plus 1. Collect like terms, 4x plus 3. Okay, again in the textbook it shows you that they are the same. Okay, so you can have a look in there and check. What now? Practice yet again. Function D1 in the textbook.